By the time I got to Mexico, I already had all the political reasons to leave. I met an American woman who had lived in Mexico for many years. This would be October of 1967. And at dinner, she suddenly went into a tirade about Che Guevara because he had just been killed. He'd been captured and executed, and it was just out in the papers that day. And so she was furious. She went into this tirade about this horrible, stinking CIA that had murdered the best hope for Latin America in generations. And she loved Che Guevara. She thought he was the most wonderful man in the world. And I was in love with her, and she was in love with me, and I thought to myself as I sat there at dinner, I said, wow, what am I going to do? And so the upshot is that she was the personal factor which led me actually to say, I'm quitting now.
The case against the CIA has always lacked information on how precisely its officers set about their covert action. Philip Agee, now living in Cornwall, was such an officer, and his diary, to be published by Penguin in the next few weeks, gives his version of what life is really like inside the agency. He names every officer and agent he's ever met, and describes a CIA man's work in daily detail.
Why should I be delicate with them? I don't expect any quarter in return, because this is part of the conflict that's going on in the world right now. The CIA is enforcing American economic exploitation, and people are dying, and people are starving because of this system.
In actual fact, what had happened is Henry Kissinger had intervened secretly with the British government to force them or pressure them to deport me and to cause me all these problems, because not only was I deported from Great Britain, but that was followed by a kidnapping and deportation by force from France, plus Holland and Italy and Germany and Norway would not let me in. And so over a 2-year period, they were constantly pressuring these governments, which had no provocation from me at all. So they tried very hard during a period of time in the 1970s to stop my work, but I just continued, got on with my life, and achieved stability in Germany. And now, in the last 7 or 8 years, I've been coming frequently to the United States, and I think I've been in practically every nook and cranny of the country at hundreds of meetings, political rallies, and university lectures over these last 8 years.
When I was a kid, the American flag was something that was absolutely marvelous. Whenever the American flag went by in a parade, we took our hats off, put our hands over our hearts, and we really felt it, because this is the symbol of the United States and the way the United States should behave. We have to have something like that in order to hold ourselves together. In those days, the Depression was really seriously affecting everybody, and me too. Along about that time, I began to travel to different shooting matches in the Midwest, and I finally got to shooting against the U.S. Marine Corps team. And I used to beat the Marines, every one of them, and the captain of the Marine team came to me and said, "Son," he said, "have you ever thought about enlisting in the Marine Corps?" And I said, "No, Captain, I never have." And he said, "Well, I tell you what, if you would enlist in the Marine Corps, when you're finished the training in Parris Island, I'll see that you're assigned to the Marine Corps rifle and pistol team." And I said, "Geez, you know, I'll be getting paid for shooting." I was scared stiff, of course. And we went up there and went in the commandant of the Marine Corps' office. So he said, "Well, this young man is a specialist in marksmanship training, and we would like to commission him in the Marine Corps." I said, "Commission? Oh, my God." He says, "We've never done anything like that before. Commissioned man from civilian life." And he said, "Well, sir, I think this is the time to do it." He scratched his head. He said, "I think you're right. Young man, you're a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps." I said, "Oh, my God, this is terrible." I went through World War II as an officer of the Marine Corps, came back, and one night the doorbell rang, and I went, and here's a nattily dressed man in his nice suit and a snap-brim hat, and he said, "May I come in?" And I said, "Well, I think you better identify yourself. Who are you?" "Well," he said, "I know who you are, and you've been recommended very highly to our organization." I said, "What's your organization?" "Well, I'm not at liberty to tell you what the organization is." And I said, "This is crazy." So he said, "Well, come on in." He was a little guy, and I thought I could handle him pretty well. And they said, you have been accepted in our organization, and we want you to go to Central America." And I said, "What? Central America? Come on." So that's how it happened. And then I joined this group that went to Central America, and I found out that I was supposed to be in charge of overthrowing a government in Central America. And, you know, it doesn't sound right. And I said, well, what's the government? Well, we don't want to go into it too deeply here yet. I said, well, I think maybe we better forget the whole thing. Oh, no, it's not very important. So finally, he did let out that we were going to overthrow the government of Guatemala. Well, now, I had been to Guatemala before, several years before that, because I was a member of the U.S. Olympic team, and we were requested to go down and help organize the games, the Central American and Caribbean Games.
Doves are released, living symbols of the peace and friendship among the 22 nations represented.
So I knew people down there. I knew this gentleman by the name of Arbenz, and the CIA was going to have me overthrow these friends of mine. Well, they explained to me that this is extremely important to the security of the United States. When they pull that, you know there's something wrong, because the United States is so secure, and nobody's ever going to do anything to it. Anyway, so I said, well, okay, I'll do it. And we organized a group of dissident Guatemalans, armed them and trained them minimally, and sent them off up to overthrow the government.
Fighting ends in Guatemala. These rebel troops, backed by air power, have compelled the ousting of Guatemala's pro-communist regime and have won a ceasefire from government forces. That red rule in Guatemala is over is grimly symbolized by the determination of the insurgents themselves and by this effigy of ex-President Arbenz, who fled the country. The sign reads, "Go back to Russia."
You know, there were some people during the Arbenz regime that said that there was a question as to whether it was truly a communist regime and as to whether it was controlled by Moscow. We have here the proof that there was no question whatever.
There was no doubt at all that Russia controlled all the communists here in Guatemala, sir.
In other words, the Arbenz regime was not a Guatemalan government. It was a foreign government controlled by foreigners.
That's it, sir.
Well, what happened was that they went up there and caused great bloodshed and great damage, which has never been corrected even to this day. That started the whole thing in Guatemala, and what we're having all this trouble today. The only thing that can be done, of course, is to work with our Congress, because everything that happens in Latin America or any place else in the world begins in our Congress. Now look, are you in favor of killing somebody that you don't know? Are you in favor of torturing somebody? Are you in favor of locking people up in dungeons and things? Are you really in favor of that? Because I don't think you are. And I think I can get that across pretty well if I get a chance to talk to them like that.
I feel that because of the problems that I went through, the realizations that I came to, the efforts that I've taken to counter, people may call it this monster, that I am contributing so much now that I could not have contributed had I not joined the agency.
There's no way I can make amends, but certainly helping in this effort to expose the abuses of our intelligence services, perhaps in some small way will help pay that debt.
In an organization that celebrates loyalty and secrecy, the public confessions of these former agents have been hard to swallow. But as revelations of the agency's failures and deceit pile up, the courage to speak out has spread from one agent to another.
I promise that I will do as much as I can for peace in Latin America. Thank you very much. A number of us have organized this group of former U.S. Intelligence people, and we are very serious because we have, and because of the experience we have, we believe that we should have a certain amount of influence in the Congress and in the government.
Frank Church, the late chairman of the Senate Select Committee to study intelligence, concluded that covert operations was really a semantic disguise for blackmail, sabotage, assassination, whatever the United States wanted to do to influence other countries to its will.
In small ways, Congress has pressured the CIA to reform itself. Hundreds of individuals who smuggled drugs, tortured, and murdered in the name of the agency have recently been purged from its payroll, and oversight committees have been created to monitor the agency's activities.
One of my biggest jobs was to get the CIA to understand that they could do their secret operations at the same time that we were keeping the Congress adequately informed. Wasn't it easy to overcome that dichotomy, because the CIA people just assumed that if you told the Congress, it was all over the newspapers the next day. Wasn't really the case.
But it is similarly true that many of these congressmen and senators become members of a covert club. If they're given access to the information, then they consider themselves to be on the inside. They don't share it. So all too often they are co-opted into a system of secrecy that contributes to a major intelligence scandal every 5 or 6 years or so.
The great problem with the Central Intelligence Agency today is that it completely missed the end of the Cold War. For 25 years, it reported everything there was to know about the Soviet Union, accepting the fact that it was collapsing. The great question is whether we should abolish it. We should abolish it. Weapons intelligence, put it in defense. Political intelligence, put it with the State Department, which is where the president should be turning for that kind of advice. And economic information, well, that's open and public the world over.
But until the American public know how much the CIA receives in money every year, and know how many people they have, and what they're doing all over the world, the CIA will continue to bumble along in some sort of romantic role that they've ascribed unto themselves, and the American people attribute to the CIA, because we know nothing about it.
I believe that what is happening right now is that there is more and more information about CIA coming out with freedom of information, and some of the things that have been released declassified. We're finding out a lot of things, and I think that the American people are going to say, no, we can't do that. It's immoral, it's wrong, it's against everything I believe in. It's not patriotic, it's not good even for our country. It certainly is not good for the world.